Let's not do that. Start recording. I
Oh,
just
on
I
Twitch or
just
what?
went live on Twitch by accident. Okay, let's start by looking at the maps of um, those of you who were here. I actually want to start with yours, Laskov. I'm like really surprised by this map. I'm gonna play through it first though, just to see what changes you've made and give everyone a chance to look at it. I'll be honest, I kind of forgot the song was this long. A little bit of an awkward silence. Okay, I'm just gonna point this out immediately.
Copy paste.
Yeah, copy paste.
But
We we,
nice.
we
I
can
thought it is.
we can discuss that once we've seen the rest of the map though.
Yeah, I would even first talk about some other things, maybe in general impressions.
Hmm. Okay, well that's the map. I just want to start off by saying the amount of improvement you've made in just one map is amazing. Like you've pretty much there are still of course some issues with rhythm, which I will get into, but your rhythm has like leveled up since the last map, and I'm really glad that you took my advice and my suggestions.
I
It
don't know
does.
how it looked like before, but I think I've seen something by you before, and it's definitely uh seems very relatively good. Yeah. Oh, hi, Rumia.
Oh, hey, Romeo. So if you want some context, and if Laskov's okay with that, I can show the previous map. Okay, I guess I'll show it. So this is the
I think I've even
previous.
seen this.
Yeah, I think you might have actually been possibly in the VC.
No, I wasn't in the VC for this.
Ah, or maybe I showed you outside
I've,
of this.
I've actually no, not wasn't this one. I've given someone feedback on the same song, I think.
Maybe it's a popular song to map. especially with it being featured artist. Yeah, the rhythm has improved quite a bit, which is really good to see. Like I was saying,
Interesting that the rhythm is like a little bit old stylish. It's kind of a general mapping. Sorry, Jordan.
well, this is somewhat the cause. In fact, I won't say cause because it makes it sound negative. It's somewhat due to the advice I gave in terms of rhythm. Lasker, if you pretty much applied what I told you, like almost spot on, barring a couple of places where the execution may not be the best. Basically, I asked Lasker to focus on one layer only and focus on emphasizing that one layer.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, especially with this old style. I feel like there are certain sections where maybe the snapping was like weird, so instead you transition to following the drums or something. But with
Yeah,
this kind of style, it works relatively well to just focus on one instrument. So yeah, noticeable.
it does. In fact, we can go over a couple of examples of where that happened. I think here.
Yeah, as like how the vocals like doing like a 3/4 or triplets.
They're doing 3/4. So, in fact, I'll just play this. I'm not sure if you noticed this, Laskerf. But can you tell what's wrong with this rhythm? I'll give you a second to answer. It felt weird. So the strange thing with this is elsewhere you followed the vocals like quite closely. Okay, that's maybe a bad example because there is a tiny bit of a mistake here as well, but you get the idea. Where you've mapped all of the vocals with an active object, and you followed it quite closely. But when you've gotten to here, you've kind of simplified everything as a half beat rhythm. When the vocals are doing like much more interesting things. If you listen to the vocal of the rhythms behind all of this, you'll probably notice. Like if you compare that with the way you mapped this part, it's quite obvious.
Can you maybe make show how you would do it, or do you still want to see if he gets the issue?
Yeah, I'm just. I will give you an example. I just want to see if you can. Giving an example of how I would fix something is one thing, but actually recognizing a mistake is more important.
Yeah, like what should the rhythm actually be?
Okay. I'll do it. So that's really what the rhythm should be like. There's a couple of things that you could probably change with this rhythm.
Is there something on 10?
On 10, there's kind of like a pickup on the vocal.
I guess, yeah.
But yeah, it's strange how you suddenly switched layer from mapping the vocals like this, and then suddenly go into like a quite simple half beat rhythm. And the thing about the half beat rhythm as well, it feels like there's not enough objects there, like it's not dense enough. And that's simply because of the BPM of the song is 115 BPM. So a half beat jump at such a low BPM like this feels more like a one beat jump.
Or 3/4 or something. Really slow.
like much slower than it would at a higher BPM.
Can I maybe make a point about some spacing in general?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Uh, I don't know if I should I turn on the stream or
Yeah, if you turn on the oh wait, no, actually, just send me the timestamp so then I can catch it on the stream.
okay. Not sure if I will be sending timestamps in general, but like, so one issue I sometimes notice is that when there are larger gaps in rhythm, the spacing is sometimes like oh, let me start in a different way. I think in general you want to have the sort of like the player consistently move at relatively the same speed throughout your map. Um, with the exception of like if there's a more intense thing going on, then they should move faster, slower, and stuff. But in general, they should like gradually move through everything. The issue is with your rhythm, there are a lot of like really large gaps. Like, I can give one example, which is say this one gap here, one beat gap here. Because it's such a large gap in rhythm, you sort of have to you would have to move it, space it out a lot more for the player to not slow down too much. And I think that happens a lot in this map where it's like the rhythms aren't as dense sometimes, so the player like has to slow down in terms of movement. With all the 1/4 patterns and stuff, they're pretty okay. Like with the circles overlapping and everything.
Yeah, Sally's raising some good points. I think at this point now your rhythm has progressed quite a bit. We can start to move on to subjects like emphasis.
Yeah.
There are other something which applies in a similar way would be these, where you
Oh,
have
I
like
actually like these.
these these are kind of cool, but they do suffer the same kind of issue unless you kind of execute your map around this idea
Mhm.
um,
The player
of
sort of like to what's it like either memorize the rhythm or like be good at reading the circles. Like the spacing is not super intuitive.
yeah, it is also an issue of yeah, you did everywhere. Um, I would say in the context of the rest of this map that they don't really fit. Because you have a lot of movement through a lot of the other 1/4 patterns, like just like
Yeah, like the player expects just clicking normally.
yeah, usually you have
Like
a big
these.
jump into or a big jump out of your 1/4 patterns. And just to take this to the extreme, there is like a pattern there, a piece in particular, which is this one. I want to discuss this in a bit more detail in a moment, but it's a very strange to do this in a map which hasn't really focused on this kind of spacing idea as a concept. Now, concepts is like such a loaded word, and I think it probably wouldn't help you to go into too much detail in that at the moment. Usually, you can get something which seems weird on its own to work with the rest of a map. But in this example, this kind of patterning, the fact you've not used it outside of Kai's, and there's also some inconsistency with how you're using it, um, kind of does make the patterns kind of play very strangely and not really fit the rest, in my opinion. Now, what would your opinion on that be, Sally?
Uh, I saw. I sort of get what you mean. Um, I mean, I'm not sure if it's necessarily if it doesn't fit in this map. It's hard to say for me personally, but it's definitely like a bit of a weird thing. I'm not sure if you should try stuff like that out already or maybe later.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a case of you have interesting ideas, but I think maybe it would be a good idea to get some fundamentals down before you tried anything like that.
Yeah, like me to get back to the spacing idea I was talking about in general. Maybe you can show or explain it a little better on screen, Jordan. But like because your rhythm has like a lot of these large gaps. You sort of should maybe it's how do I say it? It's best when all of the rhythms sort of like if a rhythm is twice as long, then you should like space it at least twice as much as one that's less
Yeah.
dense.
So another
So
way to put it in a more general sense would be the different gaps of rhythm you have should have a unique spacing or like a distinct spacing. The way people usually do that is by making larger rhythm gaps spaced further apart, which makes them look like very. This looks now. The difference between this space in here and this space in here is very different. But the reason we can do this spacing so big is because there is the 1 beat gap there. How you had the current spacing like this is spaced similarly, or even in some cases slightly smaller than some of your half beat jumps, like this,
yeah,
which makes it the player feel, or at least in terms of how the map plays, like this jump is, it should be here. And I'm not just talking from a readability perspective, because that's not really that major of an issue here. The main issue is the fact that a player needs to suddenly stop how fast they're moving their cursor, or at least slow it down, to hit this object so it feels unnatural.
have you at all talked with your mentees about filler rhythm?
The topics have been a bit different. Well, with each mentee there is kind of a topic. And the last curve is rhythm. We've not gotten to the point of filler rhythm yet.
I see. I was just not sure if I should say anything about maybe that.
Laskov,
Kinda
if you
maybe.
Laskov, would you like to hear about filler rhythm, or do you think you'd like to move on with some other aspects of this map?
Filler rhythm, yes. Okay, so one thing that's or one way a lot of modern mappers nowadays sort of fix the or deal with this kind of thing I was talking about with the large gaps in spacing, sort of, or with movement through everything being sort of consistent, is that they make a lot or maybe more or even all of the gaps between objects in the timeline like the same. Basically, yeah, like a good example would be
I'll get the classic
Clover's.
example up.
Yeah. Just get into some section. Like if you see, if you look at the timeline of this, you can see that almost all of the objects are 1-2 or 1-4 or something like that. Now some of the like slider ends, or I don't even know, maybe some of the circles as well, they are sort of like placed in there, even if there is no sound. Most people do it with slider ends because slider ends don't necessarily have to land on the sound. So because the mapper is doing this, he doesn't have to worry as much about using different spacing for different rhythms to make everything still move a lot, to make the player move through everything consistently. You sort of have this like issue because you have a lot of large gaps that you would have to pay a lot more attention to spacing the longer rhythms out more. I'm not sure. Does it make kind of sense?
It's kind of going back to, I suppose I have covered this slightly with Laskov. Kind of like how I was explaining, a slider end doesn't necessarily have to fall on a sound, because it's not an active object that's clicked. A player just moves through it. And what Selly's trying to explain is you can use slider ends to make your rhythm feel more natural, and to kind of fill gaps in the song rather than having like an empty space. So a way you could apply this in your map. Where is it? It's 9 seconds, right? So a way you could apply this in your map is just by making this a half beat slider. Then you've got all half beat gaps through this. And now suddenly, you don't have just a slow 1 beat gap. Instead, you've got what's probably would be considered a more what's the correct word for this? A more engaging rhythm, because there's kind of more stuff going on, I guess you could say.
Kick sliders are a bit different.
Yeah, kick sliders are you can't really use kick sliders for filler rhythm unless we're getting into some other more complicated topics.
Yeah, it's usually not a good idea.
Yeah, usually people will use filler rhythm with either half beat sliders like this just to keep even rhythms, or if you even wanted to, you could extend certain sliders, depending on the sound behind them.
Would probably make sense if 2 was extended and 3 wasn't. Because on 2 there's like this there's a sound in the background that's like longer. So there's this kind of like if you can extend the slider a little bit to make the player feel more of a like they have to hold the key down for longer. Now, you don't necessarily have to use filler. For example, the rhythm you've used throughout this entire map, it's sort of a bit more old school, where like everything is specifically on a sound. There's nothing that's like mapped to nothing. And that's still a thing you can do nowadays. It's just that you have to be a lot more aware of using more spacing between longer gaps and things. Like, say, if you have a certain chain of objects that have a lot of very small gaps between them, they can be very close together. And then when there's something that's a beat later, then that should be maybe on even the other side of the screen or something, like very relatively far away.
Yeah,
So,
you don't necessarily have to do this. A lot of the times you'll want to use filler rhythm to kind of, as I mentioned, make your map more engaging, and feel like the rhythm is more denser than it is. Now, the only reason I've put it in this intro is simply because it's the example Sally mentioned, but the best place to do this kind of stuff is pretty much, in a sense, artificially increasing the density. The best place to do this would be where the song calls for it. So, well, I suppose the example here would be the quite unique bass sound on here. But you wouldn't really want to use filler rhythm everywhere in this intro. And
it
it's
increases the density, makes things seem more intense than they are.
yeah, and then let's say in the choruses, so in the Kai, I believe in one of my earlier VCs, I went over like song pacing and intensity, if you remember, or do you want me to recap that? So basically, the whole idea that when the song sounds and feels more intense, your mapping should reflect that. Kind of. Yeah, that's essentially it. If you do simplify it, of course it's more than just more intense equals more spacing. In this example here that Sally's pointed out with filler rhythm, you can do it with more than just spacing. You can do it with rhythm as well. You can also do it with more harsher movement. There's a lot of ways that you can do it, but that's essentially correct. Now, something in particular I wanted to point out. In fact, let me just go back a bit. I mentioned the copy paste when I was watching through it. Now, I know Sally said there's other things to discuss. The reason I want to discuss copy paste in particular is simply because of the nature of this assignment being speed mapping. Copy paste is a good way to map quickly, but you do need to be careful because as soon as I saw this section, I recognized that it was copy pasted. Now, there is a discussion to have as to whether if a player recognizes a section is copy pasted, does that make their gameplay experience worse? Like that is a very loaded discussion which we probably won't get into. But there's one really simple workaround to this. You can copy paste as much as you want. The only thing you got to be careful of is introducing variety in your patterns. So you could copy paste this whole section, which you did, and to make it feel like it's not copy pasted, all you do is you move some things about. Make it play essentially the same. Of course, don't ruin your. You can keep the rhythm exactly the same if you really wished. But if you just change the way the map visually looks and plays slightly, like of course you wouldn't suddenly introduce like large spacing like this. Keep it generally the same, but just move everything about a bit. That's essentially what I do. If I have a section which is basically an exact copy paste, I will just kind of move stuff about, do some different visuals. And in fact, let me give an example of that.
If you need another example, my fragments map.
It's okay.
You have an example already.
I'll just I can pull up any of my maps.
All copy paste, clearly.
It's true though. So this one section here repeats pretty much exactly here. Wait, never mind.
Point, it's earlier.
There's like a fake drop. It's kind of a bad example. But you can tell how a lot of these rhythms are repeating, but each time I'm maybe introducing a different visual element. So one direct comparison would be this pattern. And this pattern. This second pattern is more intense, but essentially they carry the same idea. So it is kind of a hard thing to get your head around in terms of creating variation, essentially. I copy pasted these sections, but just by looking at it, you probably couldn't tell.
I can't even tell that you copy pasted them.
That's because I'm so good. No, I copy paste everything, you know. If a section repeats, I copy paste it, and then basically change the visuals, change the slider shapes, change the positions of the objects, and then it makes mapping that next section way quicker because I've copy pasted all of the rhythm and hit sound in. Except all I really did was move the objects about and change the slider shapes. So that's when I speed map. That's what I do. And in fact, another example would be, I don't know if I should show this map.
It's a tournament thing, or
no? It's it may be a bad influence. Anyway, this section.
Can you turn off the video?
Oh, the video's cool though. Okay.
Sure, but it's distracting, especially when it's super bright.
Well, the background's even brighter. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Where is it? Okay, it's here. So that's that section. This next part here is copy pasted.
You can recognize some of the copy paste.
Yeah, there is.
But it's still very different.
It's still very different. Like the positions of objects are quite different.
They're rotate it around and stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, it's copy paste is good for mapping fast. But don't just. At least I would not recommend just straight up copy pasting. Just switch some objects about and stuff.
At
Let's-
the very least, if you're participating in like a contest or if you want to rank something, people, especially BNs, they're gonna like be like ass mad about it. Like, and for contest judges, they're gonna like be like, oh, this map used copy paste on an entire section. That's bad, really, really bad. Even if you maybe don't, even if it's complicated, whether it's actually bad or something, people are gonna judge it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And then I will just throw my opinion out there. If I play a map and I notice a section has been copy pasted, it ruins the map for me. And that is pretty much the end of that. Like, if I notice a copy pasted section, unless it's there are occasions where copy paste can work well. But yeah, most of the time it ruins the map.
There was one other thing about this map with rhythms being weird, I think. Might have been one part where the singer is like,
Yeah, we can go over some specifics. Yeah, we can go over some specifics. I'll just play through the map and I'll pause when I notice something weird.
yeah, like around 4, 30, 34 seconds. There's this part.
Yeah, this part. I get the idea here. I appreciate the idea that you noticed the pacing of the song here dropped, and so you dropped the density of your rhythm. But there is a point where you are essentially just ignoring the song. And there is also the fact of it probably drops in intensity like way too much. It is hard to balance rhythm because how you've mapped so far, you've pretty much in most sections made all of the vocals active, where you've put either a slide ahead or circle on them. But to do it here, you might feel that this rhythm is too dense. Wait, is this one save?
I think it's 1/6. That's why I was finding it out.
Now, in fact, now I've just noticed this is 1/6. Can I just ask you point blank, did you put the sliders there because you couldn't figure out the rhythm? Because it depending on the answer to that question, I'm gonna change what I tell you.
Not necessarily a bad thing if you didn't notice, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Well, that pretty much goes to everything I say about anyone. Yeah, well, I'll answer both then. Understanding when rhythms change, especially to, I suppose, in the context of this song, 1/6 is unusual.
It's not. Actually, I feel like personally it's not, but
Well, the
this
rest
is
of
like
the
a
rest of the
popular
song is basically it's
Yeah.
1/4, so
It is how do you say, unexpected in that sense. You wouldn't expect
yeah.
a different snapping. Yeah.
If you do try to place a rhythm and it feels too fast or too slow, like let me give you the basic mapper guide to this. So let's say I wanted to map this and it sounds like this. I can tell if I turn the effects volume up. This does not match up with the vocals and it's too fast. One thing I can tell is the first vocal is on this red tick. But I know the rest of these circles are not matching up. So I know for definite that this is not a 1-4 rhythm. I know it's slower than 1-4, so I'm going to try 1-2. No, that's definitely way too slow. So what's between 1-2 and 1-4? Oh,
1-5. Just kidding.
it's 1-3, except we are running into a bit of a problem here. This first object isn't on the 1-3. One thing, I don't know whether I need to explain this, but 1-3 and 1-3 beat Snap Divisor and 1-6 beat Snap Divisor are the same, except 1-6 just has like an extra thing in between. So I know it's probably 1/3 or 1/6, just because I know it's not a half beat and I know it's not a quarter beat. So
Yeah.
if
You
I,
most likely it won't be 1/5 or something because or let's just put it that way. 1/2, 1/4 are the most common rhythms, and then 1/6, 1/3 are the next most common, and then 1/5, 1/7, and everything else is like very, very rare.
yeah, so it's pretty much only the only beat snap devices you really need to worry about when mapping is half beat. I suppose if you want to be technical, 1 beat, but half beat, 1/3, 1/4, and 1/6.
Maybe 1/8.
And maybe 1/8. In fact, 1/8 would be particularly relevant in this song, considering the BPM. But when I map, I never use half beat, and I never use 1/3. I only ever use 1/4 or 1/6. Because
And if something special happens, you change it.
yeah, and then if there's something strange happens, then yeah. But I use 1/4 all the time, as I'm probably sure you already do. Use 1/4 because it includes the half beats and the 1/4s. Yeah, and I use you stay in 1/4, good. And then when I come to an unusual part like this, I'll switch to 1/6 because it includes the 1/6 rhythms and the 1/3 rhythms.
Can I maybe talk about one other thing you could do to listen to which rhythm it really is?
Yeah.
One thing which can also help sometimes is especially if the rhythm starts on a white tick and ends on a white tick or something like that, or you can just like listen how many sounds you hear. If it's like I hear five evenly if it's like I hear 5 evenly spaced sounds, then it must be 1/5 or something. If you hear say a few sounds but they're not evenly spaced, then it must be something different. But if in general, if you notice the between two white ticks, there is all the sounds are evenly spaced out or roughly evenly spaced out in time, then you just have to listen to how many notes is it. Okay, then you know the rhythm basically. If it's 4, then it's 1/4. If it's 6 notes, 1/6, etc.
Yeah, I suppose kind of like counting the syllables. Yeah.
Yeah, count the syllables, count the drum hits. I mean, in this case, it's like does it start on a red tick?
It starts on a red tick, so I suppose this may be not the best example,
Yeah,
but
or like it starts on a red tick and ends on one, so that's basically one beat.
it doesn't actually end on a red tick. But I know the
Okay,
vocal starts here, and I know the vocal ends here, so there must be. This is the start, this is the end, and there's 5 syllables. So wait,
6. No?
wait, I've messed this up a bit. I'm confused now.
It's actually 1/5. Imagine. I think it ends on the last white tick. Or, no?
Oh, right, I see. Yeah, I had this placed on the wrong part.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's 5 syllables. It starts here and ends here, and they're all evenly spaced. And as you can tell from the timeline, these are all evenly spaced. So that's another way you can work it out somewhat.
If you play a lot of stuff, like in tournaments or something, you might even notice just the in general the feeling of you just maybe hear it and you're like, that doesn't sound like one half or something. And then I just have to try something else out. You might even just know how one part
Yeah.
sounds.
I think a good thing to do may be to maybe look at and study a map which does have some unusual rhythm changes. Just try to look at a pattern and think, okay, what rhythms does this use? Just to kind of get used to listening to that kind of thing.
I'm gonna pull up Ekoro.
I wasn't actually going to pull that up.
It's probably not even a good idea.
No, I was going to pull up a different map. This map is probably got more complicated rhythm than what you'll use, but honestly, if you can get a grasp of the rhythms on this map, which probably, I mean, you're not exactly mapping it, you're just kind of studying it. Um, it would be good to kind of think, to get used to listening to stuff like this has some unusual rhythms. It has 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, and I'm pretty sure it has 1/7, but I'm not sure. Um, but this is going to be your assignment. Yeah, this map is so cool. I love this map.
That's not very cool.
Kadax, I'm kind of surprised you know this map. It's kind of such an underrated map. Also, there's the song. The song is produced by an Archaea charter, which makes it even cooler.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, this is going to be your assignment. I basically want you to look through this map and send me examples of where the rhythm is unusual. So basically everywhere where the rhythm isn't just 1/4.
Couldn't you just do something like put circles on all sounds? Or is that too much effort, maybe?
Well, the rhythm in this map is quite complex. I want to give an assignment which is more or less observing and noting where rhythm changes, not actually making a rhythm. Because actually making the rhythm of this song would be pain. Yep. I'll play through it a little bit more so you can look at it. Oh wait, sorry, I need to, actually, as a matter of fact, I've just realised something.
Is it wrong or what?
Okay, never mind, you can't use this map. Wait, no, actually you can. I'll just have to edit it for you. It was made pre the Beat Snap divisor changes, so it's using BPM changes instead of like actual snapping. I'm gonna need to edit this map so you can actually do the assignment, but I'm gonna be sending you this map.
Good one.
Yeah, it's like increasing BPM to like fake 1/5 rhythms and stuff. Because once upon a time, the only options you could select in here, you never used to be able to pick 1/5 or 1/7 or 1/9. Okay, I'm just going to make a note of that so I can send you this later. Just whilst I'm making notes and stuff, I'm going to extend this feedback to the rest of the mentees here. Can you think of anything else that you think Laskerf, any other feedback Laskerf could have? Anything in particular? Wait, does Everstrike have 1/5?
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
Wait, not Everstrike. It was a different song. What's the one that comes after Everstrike when in the event?
Oh, it's the Sakuzyo song.
Yeah,
Um,
that one. That was 1/7 and 1/6.
Yeah, that's got some funny rhythms.
I even remember that one because I know it had those rhythms before they did before they added them to Ocean. A friend of mine tried to map that song. And Nightcore tried to map it as well, right?
I've always wanted to map that song.
It's been ranked already, right?
I think so. Cherry ranked it, right? Or has a GD on a ranked set? I'm looking up what the song's called.
By the way, there's probably a few rhythms in this map. Well, like there's vocals doing doubles that you're not doing, or there's like, yeah, just there's a few individual places where something about the rhythms could change, but it's not something major.
Yeah. So okay, you're leaking the next assignment, which is to mod this map. Yeah, it's Fractury. I've always wanted to map that song.
Oh, I can maybe say one more thing about this map, which is something that's related to the point about large gaps not being spaced out as much. It's sort of, I noticed that a lot of the half beat spacing you use, that varies a lot. Like there's larger jumps and smaller jumps. I don't know just how to explain this. I feel like there's a bit of an issue with using really high spacing on those while having those really large gaps in rhythm. You know what I mean, Sean? Fuck.
Yeah.
Like, it's like your 1.5 spacing. Basically, it can it varies a lot. Like that's pretty okay. Like that can work, but then all of the other sort of larger rhythms or longer rhythms, they don't. They're just all consistently spaced.
Yeah, they're all
in a way.
just spaced like quite
Too low.
too low and always too low. But does anyone else have any comments on this map? This isn't an optional question.
If you don't answer, you get kicked right now.
If you don't answer, you'll be joining Zenori.
I have a very important one. You see this pattern? You should take 2 circles from it and make it a perfect straight line. What done? Do it right now, Jordan. Take 3 and 5. No, that's bad. Then it's not in the
What do you
middle.
mean? How is this bad? This is pretty good.
It's 5 is in the middle, and that's good. 5 should stay in the middle.
No, sorry, it's not a 5-degree rotation.
True, but that's not all schools enough.
No, this just memeing. This pattern is
There's nothing wrong with it, really.
no. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, it seems nobody else has any comments, so modding this map is legitimately going to be an assignment for someone. That's punishment for not answering my question.
Extra work. Next map, or
Let's go to Cadax. I genuinely haven't seen this map.
I remember one thing to point out on this one.
I need to fix these volumes. Ah, okay.
Okay. Do you have anything to say for now, Jordan? Or
I would like to take a second look at it. Yeah, I can think of
I don't think using too much straight lighters is an issue.
no, that's not really a problem. That's more of a personal style. If you think you're using too many straight sliders, then you can change that. In my opinion, it wouldn't improve the quality of the map. It might make it more visually interesting to some people. I think your slide shapes are fine though, so it's not really a. I understand if you want to change it. It's not really a problem though. One thing I noticed immediately from this intro is the sudden drop of space in here.
Yeah. And there should be like larger spacing into the freeze, I feel like, because there's these loud sounds on them.
Yeah, there's the opportunity for a lot of emphasis on this. Considering in this start part, you did like
Sorry.
large jumps on these snares here, and you made them stand out quite a bit by using a stacked pattern. And then suddenly here you've reverted to like tightly spaced triangles. Kind of really drops the intensity of this map a lot.
Yeah. Something I want to say, something which you can sort of keep is you can keep this. I feel like you can keep the small spacing between the circles if you then have large spacing into the sliders. That sort of still keeps the overall intensity relatively high while making it feel very different.
It does. It goes back to what I've mentioned previously about emphasis only works by creating contrast. And by contrasting spacing like this, it gives this jump much more impact with this jump being so small.
Yeah, but yeah, just so like John said that overall the spacing feels so, but so to just say you don't need to make all of the nodes then larger. You just make a few larger, and that will have an impact on the section in general.
Yeah, and this is particularly notable in terms of if you listen to the song, it's not exactly decreasing in intensity because you still have that. Would you call it a choir?
Not sure.
Well, the vocals anyway in the
Okay.
back continue through this whole section, and in my opinion, but the way people can perceive the intensity of music really does depend. I believe that choir is what's given this section quite a lot of impact, and why I think it deserves high pacing. But then you come to this section, um, the density is probably higher than this part, kind of, I guess you
Yeah,
could say.
I
And
think in
the
general the rhythm
spacing's
in this section could use work.
the spacing's the same as well. So to compare this part to this part, you can really see the issue when you compare the two sections.
There's a few larger jumps in this one. So it's still this one is still a little bit more intense, but John's overall point is still very true that like in the comma section, your rhythm is still really dense. So it does feel like it feels a bit too intense. Too intense. There's too much going on.
Yeah. Now, as I mentioned before about the pacing of a song, how intense it is, there's many ways you can represent it. Changes in spacing is usually a must. I say usually because there are probably cases in which you can use the same spacing and make it work still. But rhythm is a big one as well. So there's like no density drop off. There is a, to be fair, there is like, if you were to
Some
use more one beat gaps like this, you could probably make it work. But you've used like a lot of long chains of filler rhythm, which makes the rhythm feel quite dense. I think maybe just increase the free. You could either increase the frequency of these jumps, sorry, these gaps, or you could also remove some of these sliders and maybe replace them with circles, possibly. There's a lot of ways that you can do it, but I feel the rhythm does need to change, especially with the kinds of spacings as well. Actually, I suppose that spacing is quite good. Actually,
kind of. I feel like there is also a little bit of an inconsistency with like because you only there's like there are these vocals that are like doing 4 or 5 notes occasionally. Um, but and you sometimes map them with circles and sometimes you map them with sliders. It feels because you're not doing it sort of consistently undermapped or consistently circles only. It feels I don't know. To me, it feels like you're not following the vocals very well. Like you could maybe use more consistent undermapping to make it more obvious.
yeah,
I think the main issue with the intensity are those like circle patterns where there's a lot of clicking going on.
yeah. It's like these long chains, and just having some of these chains of jumps followed by like a whole, a measure of filler rhythm. Like maybe a jump like this could work if you had like a break immediately after it. Like,
Or having some sliders that start and end on the vocal, although that's maybe
yeah,
not necessarily what you want. Depends.
There's a lot of ways to do it. There's no correct way, but I hope the explanations have kind of give you guidance as to what kind of thing you should try to do in this kind of section.
Can I say something about a specific pattern earlier?
Yeah, which pattern?
It's this one.
19652. Okay.
So it's still 1-2 stacks, the half beat stacks.
Oh.
This is a general recommendation I would give when you're using 1-2 stacks like these. You should have larger spacing into them, so they don't feel like too much of an intensity drop off. If you have larger spacing into them than you maybe normally would use, there's still sort of like some intensity there because you're making the player go from really large spacing to really small spacing very quickly. That makes them like just it doesn't drop off the intensity too much. I feel like here the spacing is just a little bit too small, especially because it's like this ending of the section. You usually want to have the ending of a section end strong, I feel like. So using large spacing there would be a bit better. Same goes for like out of the sliders.
Yeah. Well, after having such an intensely sounding section of this song, I know as we've mentioned, the second half of the section kind of drops off in intensity, but let's say, for example, you did like buff these, like however you decide to do it. The song does, yeah, this is kind of like a transition to the next part. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a climax to the section, but again, it does kind of drop off quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'll still say you should. I feel like ending strong is a good idea. Or maybe it could be that because there's emphasis on the clickable nodes, having a stack on them seems to be a bit odd. Because the stack makes the gameplay less intense most of the time, unless you're using really large spacing into it. So
Yeah,
that doesn't
unless.
fit very well if it's the intense sounds of the song.
So I suppose an example where a stack would have the kind of emphasis these sounds deserves would be if you have like a large spacing into it, which is a very snappy motion, kind of like this, where there's like a huge increase in cursor movement, and then there's a sudden stop to hit this too. Having like a snappy motion, then having a player having to suddenly stop, can emphasize stacks, but you need to you need to be quite extreme with the movement for that kind of thing to work.
Yeah. Something else which could work here would be if you have actually jumps between the circle and the slider, and then the slider is like very slow. And then maybe the spacing out of the slider is also relatively small, and then into the next slider. Something like that.
So maybe something like this.
So that the slider is like the slider itself is like the low intensity object.
Yeah, and if you do want to emphasize the slider head, as I've mentioned previously about entry into sliders, I literally subconsciously angled the sliders like this. Where this kind of movement in, even though it's a slow slider, you're not necessarily moving directly through this. It still does provide some extra intensity compared to like this.
Yeah. Also, sharp entry makes the difference in SV a bit stronger, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It makes it more noticeable. Yeah, slow spacing out of the slider would probably work.
The best thing really about the slow spacing out of the slider is the fact that Usually you would avoid low spacing out of a slider due to slider leniency, where a circle feels less, a jump like this. In fact, let me just move some objects about. Let's take this jump here, this jump out of this slider end, and compare it to basically the exact same spacing between circles. Because both of these circles need to be clicked, a player has to be more accurate with their movement. They have to click this, then move directly to this. Whereas playing this slider, all they do is, play through it. I'm sure you have a very good grasp of gameplay, considering like you're quite a good player. But yeah, this is way easier than this because the slider end does not need to be actively played, it's just moved through.
Yeah, and there's some leniency. You can move a bit further away from the slider.
Exactly, yeah. It's not very visible on this skin. I'm gonna point this out just for, even though you may already know this, Kadax. Yeah, you can pretty much move right up through this slider follow ball, follow circle, I think it's called. So you can also like leave the slider end early and still hit the slider end.
There's some additional leniency at the end, but it's not necessary. We don't need to be technical about how it works, I think, right?
Yeah, that's like way too technical.
You can mention that later in a later thing.
Honestly, I think most people don't even know about that.
But yeah, so usually you wanted to say the spacing out of a slider, low spacing out of a slider feels even more small.
Exactly. So using the low spacing here just further emphasizes the large jumps.
Yeah. Also makes the slider feel slower. Or it makes the slowness of the slider like more obvious.
Yeah.
Because if there is large spacing out of a slow slider, the player might halfway through the slider start moving fast again.
Yeah, I suppose we can move on to
Bigger issues than one pattern.
just the next section, really.
It's so bright I can't see the numbers.
I'll change skin back.
It's so funny. I hope that's not the case in your recording.
It shouldn't be.
Let's hope. I feel like there's something odd about the rhythm in that section.
I
It has
think
to do
the rhythm is definitely one point. What I'd like to start off by mentioning, just because it relates to what we've just been speaking about, is spacing between sliders. So, for example, because of, I'm gonna have to switch skins back.
I'm not sure if you need to, but
The fishy fat skin doesn't have slider ball circles, so it kind of this skin makes it easy to visualize stuff.
you can also test play and show it. Yeah.
And that would require
Well,
plugging my
just make
tablet
your,
in.
sorry. Yeah, sorry, just make your point. Can you not play the one object with a mouse?
Okay, I'll mouse game.
Mouse game. And is your DPI too high?
Probably just mouse acceleration.
Anyway, you should make your point about the slider.
I can't play mouse. But yeah, just to visualize it, it's like patterns like this and this. Firstly, this. A player can move right up until this edge before they hit the next object. There is a questionable thing about the rhythm on this slider, but let's ignore that just for this example. This, considering the sound on this slider head is quite strong, this is effectively like no spacing, just because of the slider leniency. I guess no spacing would probably be like this. It's like slightly more than no spacing. To the point where it's like not emphasized at all. Because you're
Actually.
What was that?
What's the DS on it? 1.3 or something.
1.32, and that is 1.
So it will almost feel as fast as moving through the slider on its own, I guess. So it's like a very smooth movement through it. Which, if you want to emphasize the sound, that's probably not what you want.
Yeah, if you want to emphasize a sound, you don't want smooth movement. Almost all the time, you want a different, faster, or maybe more snappier movement. And
So it
this
depends on the intensity of the section. This section is, as Troy Jordan,
this section,
it's a bit more intense.
it should build up from this section just because of the pacing of the song. Other examples of this, so there's a couple in this section alone, so this as well. There is some more interesting going on with this because the player's cursor is moving down. We can get into like implied movement, where if the slider's pointing down, a player is usually going to move down through it and expect the next object to follow that path. But there's like a direction change, which makes this not as underemphasized as this, but it is still like super close spacing, so it still has the same issue.
Yeah, here might also be an issue where some players who understand the mechanics very well, or maybe even some players who just subconsciously abuse slider leniency very hard, they might just stay on the slider head and not follow the slider at all, and just move to the next object because the slider heads are so close to each other.
Yeah, that's also a concern as well. Understanding how players cheese patterns is something that's really useful when you're trying to make interesting gameplay, and probably not this style of map particularly. In my opinion, the kinds of people who play this kind of map, or at least the general target audience for a map like this, it doesn't really have the technical ability to do stuff like that naturally.
Maybe.
If you were to see this pattern in, for example, an absolutely crazy tech map, then yes, player would probably cheese it. Because up to that point, the player is most likely used to cheesing certain slider shapes because the map is literally designed around that. In a lot of in the case for a lot of tech maps.
My personal perspective on it would be that if you make a map where the player can cheese the fewest patterns possible, then you sort of like gameplay is going to be just as intended for the players that cheese and for the players that don't cheese. It's basically gonna be a similar kind of experience. But if you have some patterns where maybe they are cheesable, like we've explained, like where you can just click on the slider head and then just stay there for a moment, just chill a bit and then move to the next object. Then it's only gonna play as intended for some people. So it depends on
That's
like,
definitely it's definitely something to keep in mind.
yeah,
But
it's not necessarily too important.
if you do go into that mind frame in making every map, you're gonna limit your choices in the kinds of patterns you can make.
Definitely.
But it's a good thing to think about, especially when you're maybe making more um, extreme's the wrong word. How should I word it? No, I'm just gonna say more difficult maps. Oh yeah, you've got time to make a brew. That's fine. But yeah, it's same.
Maybe
Same
more
here.
spacing out of sliders.
Yeah, more just generally. And there's one prime example, which is this one. This is probably like the worst spacing you could have done.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that to insult or anything. This is just like an extreme of everything else.
I think even like casual players would probably because it's like so close together, and because the sliders are curved, they might just go from slider head to slider head because it's roughly the same as playing it like a curve anyway. It's hard to say, but yeah, that makes the spacing like even smaller, or makes the player move even less than you might have intended.
I think this slider velocity and this that is a good point. It's not too relevant, but it's a good thing to bear in mind how slider shapes can affect movement. When maybe you make maps that use faster SVs or longer sliders.
Oh, yeah, larger movement out of the slider might be a good idea here as well.
Yeah. See, now this is pretty cool. This is kind of like this previous example where I've mentioned this is getting a bit of emphasis because of the direction of this going down, and there's kind of like an implied movement.
Direction range.
There's like a direction change. It's implied to go down, and then you have to come back up. I know Selly's mentioned stuff like that can be cheesed, but for players who actually play the game properly,
This one can be less cheese because it's also spaced further away from.
yeah, so it is spaced further, and yeah, this is like a pretty cool example because you can use this kind of movement as emphasis in some cases. Of course, if it's too close, it's not really going to be emphasis because it's cheesable. Um, but that's like a good way to emphasize the snares on the triple. You know, compared to doing something like this, this would be considered not cheesable, but it's quite obvious which one has the most emphasis.
And not. Yeah.
Yeah, same slider movement issues.
I think here it's even a case where because you have these jumps before, the jumps feel like a lot more intense than. So this one jump pattern feels like a lot more intense than the sliders afterwards.
Yeah,
Because spacing is so small out of them, and because sliders are so lenient.
in terms of the actual phrasing of the song, um, I don't know if this was intended, but let me just make an example of how maybe this could work. If you maintained the intensity of like jump spacing like this, um, and then have this one be smaller because there is kind of like a call and respond with the vocals. Um, you can kind of use this as a kind of contrast. So large spacing, vocal changes here, and then maybe you can do something which is quite choosable or not intense just to create some contrast. So doing these kinds of patterns isn't necessarily bad. You can use it as a tool to make other jumps and spacing feel emphasized. Just don't do it everywhere because then the map is very underwhelming.
Something else you could have done. This is just an idea. You could have maybe even mapped, undermapped it with just one large slider, where there's a vocal on the head and the slider end. Obviously, that might be too low intensity, but it can work. There's just some ideas.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but listening to the song, um, I can tell, and Sally can tell as well, that this should be less intense. There's many ways you can do it, rhythm or spacing. I would prefer to keep rhythm consistent and change spacing,
Yeah, I would probably prefer that as well.
but there's a lot of options. This is a cool pattern. Now, I'd like to hear your opinion on this Kadax. What do you think about this pattern? And can you give me your thoughts on it? Like, what was the if you can remember, what was the intention behind this? Yeah, it's yeah, that's the timestamp.
Damn. GT of mine just got insta-qualified. Let's go.
Nice.
This is now on the recording forever.
Imagine qualifying a map.
A GD.
A GD, same thing. Oh wow, my last ranked standard map was a year ago. I've dropped off.
Dropped off. He copy-pasted Jordan, that's what he's saying.
So you copy pasted. What I'm really focusing on here is this grouping of sliders under this.
Can you switch back to the other skin?
Okay. You don't know. Oh, that's fine. I think explaining mapping, explaining mapping decisions is, I guess you could call it somewhat similar to modding, because in effect it's essentially analyzing your map, whether it's self-analysis or someone else's. But like analyzing maps is kind of difficult. Because sometimes you map something and then you look back at it and you think, well, that works, but I'm not sure why.
It's
The
different skills.
Well, even though you may not remember why you did it like this, is there anything you can observe from it which would make you think this is a good pattern? What I'm really trying to focus on here, at least looking through the map so far, I feel like the subjects which you would be best at maybe focusing on and getting set an assignment for would probably be movement relating to sliders. At least from what I can see from this map so far. And the reason I point out this pattern is because it's a good example of like cool movement through sliders. Now the movement through these two sliders here it looks quite large, but it's not really because of the way it's played. Because of slider leniency mentioned before, there is emphasis to this slider head. But because of the way they've been placed, a player can essentially kind of wrap around and they don't need to follow this full slider. It makes this jump to 5 feel less spaced. And it somewhat follows the vocals. Because the next two vocals after this are quite intense and high pitch. These two sliders here have a lot of movement through them. And like the example I made before with the entry angle into this slider, it makes this slider more intense than say if it was spaced like this. So this slider pattern here is quite spaced and harder to play. This one here is somewhat cheesable. It creates a nice contrast between the vocals. Does that make sense to you? So you can make patterns which are easier to play, but use those patterns to emphasize other patterns, like this example. And even if this was completely accidental, I'm not sure if you thought about this when you mapped it, but I'm sure you'll definitely think about it from here now, about creating these kinds of patterns. Well, sometimes every mapper has a happy little accident.
I mean, some people you might say all they make is happy accidents.
That's kind of
Because they just
toxic.
rely on no, but I was gonna say okay, that's a very bad way of putting it. But like some mappers, they just map based on their intuition, right? And I mean, for them, basically everything is just like it just works. And that's not necessarily bad.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I like going into that mindset when mapping. That's like how I mapped talking, where I just kind of followed my intuition of what I thought would be fun to play. And although there was an extra step to that where I kind of also ignored visuals, but yeah, that's true. I feel a bit unfair giving feedback on this section, considering this section's not completed. But I'll try. I'm not sure what to think about this.
The spacing into one is really small. And that because it's a stack as well, it makes movement slow down really hard. In a way, it then indirectly, I guess, makes the slider feel faster, but it's really weird.
That's kind of what I'm thinking as well.
I mean, the
It kind of
emphasis is sort of on one, right? So you probably want to have like the stack keep it the stack, but then have really, really large movement into it. Really large spacing.
Now there is some examples of patterns I've come across in maps where I think I'm actually perceiving this pattern wrong. Okay, yeah, no, never mind. Yeah, you should emphasize this more. For some reason, I kind of thought that it was angled like this. Where there was kind of like a wide angle anti-jump kind of thing going on. But no, never mind.
Even then, having two stacked would be weird then, I guess.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, you should give this more emphasis. You can give it more emphasis by simply spacing it more. I kind of feel like this pattern does somewhat kind of encourage a wide angle exit. I don't know if that's just me.
I think that's just.
But
What
yeah,
could be the angle of the slider that maybe makes you feel that?
possibly. But yeah, I mean, you can do spacing, or you could do like a harsh angle into it. Emphasis isn't purely based on spacing. It can also be how uncomfortable a pattern is to play. But yeah, this does deserve more emphasis than it currently has. Same applies here as well. Like you've got a huge jump here, and then quite a small sharp angle jump to this crash. And then the movement from the slider end, similar to the rest of the map, except this time it's not sliders between sliders, it's a slider to a circle. Where this is like super easy to hit and it's a half beat gap.
About the spacing, maybe in general, I feel like this is one of those songs where it's sort of like fits to have these because you have these like longer jump patterns. Something a lot of mappers with more sort of basic style sort of do is that they like start with low spacing and make the jump pattern slowly increase by in spacing every node, so then that the last node of the pattern where the sliders would be, that they like stand out a lot. Like if you look back at the pattern with a lot of jumps into that one slider we looked about earlier, it would probably be a I think it would be a cool idea if you started with low spacing and made it slowly increase. Then the note on the slider would sort of be like the climax of that.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be this extreme, but
Yeah, this is a bad example because this jump is kind of taken away from any impact on this. But yeah. But yeah, there's. I can't think of anything else to say about this map in particular, other than like some of the strange rhythm. If we go back to that.
maybe something about the section at like 35 seconds. I feel like I'm not sure whether the triples, whether they're a good idea. Cause one odd thing about them is that like the last note of the triple doesn't have a vocal. They don't have vocals on them, but triples sort of like tend to emphasize the last note. So
The thing.
it might have been a. I'm not sure how to say it. What do you think about this? What would it maybe be a better idea if these were like repeat sliders? I'm not sure actually. Because I feel like they take a bit of priority away from the vocals.
In my honest opinion, I think these triples actually work towards emphasizing the vocal. Simply because in playing this triple and stopping movement, it emphasizes like these offbeat vocals that are right after. If you can kind of see that.
Kinda.
But then there are kind of places where I would probably change it to further focus on that idea. Like probably change some of these triples which don't lead into vocals. Like,
Yeah.
I'll change some of these probably. Yeah, typically the last note of a triple is emphasized. What Sally's saying is generally, well, it is correct. The actual emphasis of a rhythm of a triple is the final note. I'm
Any string of 1/4.
or any string of 1/4. Yeah.
It adds some straight. It tends to be the case that when you play 1/4, the longer you play, the more straining it gets, and then the last note or releasing basically, not playing 1/4 anymore gives them a bit of additional emphasis.
Yeah. Yeah, well, me and Sally might have opposing viewpoints on these triples. Sally's opinion here is the rhythm emphasis of the triple itself isn't matching up with the vocal because the last note of the triple isn't on a vocal. Whereas my opinion is coming from an actual movement perspective, not rhythm, because the triple is basically emphasizing the movement to the next offbeat vocal.
I would even say it makes the movement into the next object like more difficult.
Yeah.
And that makes the next object more emphasized.
Yeah, it does.
I just earlier found it a bit. I wasn't. I'm not quite sure about the rhythm in this section because it's sort of the case that a lot of the vocals are undermapped with slider ends, and then that together with the triples makes me a bit unsure whether it fits.
Yeah, the unusual thing is the fact it's more undermapped than this part.
Yeah, that's true as well.
So if we apply Sally's suggestion, it would probably look something like this.
Or you would use a repeat slider.
Or a repeat slider, yeah. Or a kick slide if you had to be fancy.
Is there even sounds there? Because I thought they were actually mapping sounds on in the music with the triple. Like like at the end of the measure there is the hi-hat is like doing this triple. But you're just like putting the triple a bit earlier instead.
Yeah, some of these are supported by hi-hats, some of them aren't.
Some of them aren't. Oh, if I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, the first one is literally not. I'm pretty sure it's not. Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, so I would have mapped those hi-hats. Personally, maybe with a repeat slider instead. But that's just like... I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, the cool thing about triples, you can use triples in lots of different ways. How I'm kind of like how I didn't think that this was maps on hi-hats, but I thought that if they weren't hi-hats here, this could be a good example of overmapping, in my opinion.
Something else you could maybe do to fix the problem that I'm sort of talking about is just making a few more of the vocals clicked. Like the
Yeah, so like this one on this slider end. Right,
or
some of
like the
these.
first measure I would have made something like this. If we just keep the triple the same way, doing something like this instead would also work. Well, I guess that makes the vocal actually less emphasized, my bad. Because then there's like the vocal is on the slider and my bad. So forget that rhythm. That's a bad rhythm. More like this, I guess. And then my oops, wrong screenshot button. My original idea was doing this one maybe instead.
Oh, that's literally what I did. I mean, you could use both of those. This may be a good place where you could kind of use some variety in rhythm and kind of change stuff up a bit. Like for example, if you were going to undermap the hi-hats with reverse sliders, you know, you could keep some of these triples in on the more emphasized vocals. Or if you were going to change the rhythm of this to stuff like that, you could keep some 1/4 in particular parts. Okay, do you have any questions about anything that me or Sally have said? Nope.
Oh, I found this rhythm a bit weird. I would have just used rhythm like this instead. Or this would work as well. The top version would be the one where there's extra filler, in case you want to keep filler rhythm. Those sliders work as well that Jordan uses. Or do they? Yeah.
Yeah, this would be a good place where you could undermap vocals on slider ends.
Yeah, my main issue was that there's like this, there's the vocal clickable, but then the note right afterwards is also clickable, which is just
Yeah,
weird.
it takes away from the vocal. And that's probably one of the things which is causing the density to feel higher than it should be.
Yeah, it's somewhat okay here, because here the free I think is also mapped to something that's not a vocal. In that case it does work because there's also a large break in the vocal, like the vocal isn't playing for a long time. It could I mean, if you were really technical about it, you might say this rhythm like follows the vocals even more closely or something, or
Yeah.
just a one slider.
Yeah, this is also like just okay as filler too, so you don't just end up with a strange gap here. And well, it is mapped to a kick as well.
I mean, into the comp section, might say, I guess all basically everything here works. All of the options, your option, and then the two I've shown. I guess maybe the one with the reverse doesn't work well because there's nothing on the red tick, so why should there be a reverse? But yeah, just wanted to point it out that it works in that case, and not in the one pointed out earlier.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll move on to Rumia's map now.
There might be some things about the new comboing on this one, but we can ignore that.
Well, I was just gonna go get myself a drink. If you wanted to talk about some new combo and stuff, that's fine.
Let me actually.
Why, hello. I have
Oh,
my
hello.
stuff. Is this
Is this-
record again?
Yeah,
What?
yeah, it's been recorded.
Oh, okay.
Is
Oh,
this
I knew that already.
sent to FBI directly?
What did you say?
Is this being sent to the FBI directly after?
Yes.
No, it's been sent to MI6.
Oh,
Damn. Not the CIA.
Just
Um,
directly to James Bond.
I have a question for Katzax.
Okay, while you ask your question, I'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Okay. Katzax, first of all, I don't know how to correctly pronounce your name, so I'm sorry for that. Second of all, you sometimes have your comboing, like say, this, where it's like 1 2 1 2, right? What's like the logic for you behind using those combos? Like when do you use combos like that and when do you not? What's your idea behind those? Like you use them here as well. Here as well. So it's probably easier to read in a lot of cases. I'm not sure if any of you have ever like what's his name again? Like watch any videos by Digital Hypno or something. There's like this idea that he sometimes talks about of what's it called again? Like the thing about splitting patterns up into sort of digestible chunks. Oh, chunking, that's the word, right? You can probably like go onto Digital Hypno's YouTube channel and there's gonna be some video about like chunking or pattern comprehension or some shit like that. The basic idea is that patterns are like easier to play or to read if you, instead of reading everything at once, you like split them up into groupings of 2 notes or 3 notes, etc. Now, obviously, as a mapper, you can kind of do that with your new comboing, right? Like in those cases, with the overlapping jumps.
Oh, are you
Makes
talking
it easier
about
to read.
pattern processing?
Pattern processing, that's the word. Chunking, I guess, is the trick to do pattern processing more easily or something. That's the word, yeah. So you're definitely right that that's one way you can sort of use comboing. I would personally say I don't like I don't like it when people use combos that way personally. I think combos should mostly be reserved for splitting up the notes in your map based on phrases in the song. So like, you're mostly doing that in the beginning, where there's like, when there's certain phrases in the music, you make them all part of the same combo, and if they're part of a different phrase, they're a different combo color. You mostly do that. Yeah, they're basically there to group things. Now, I think it's not a good idea to use new comboing specifically to just split things up into easier to read groupings if it like contradicts the phrases of the song. And I think that's sometimes what you're doing. There's like you sometimes, especially with these 1-2 combos, you like use them just to make things more readable. But that conflicts then with the phrasing of the song, where these notes are part of the same phrase of the music, but you're sort of implying they're not part of the same phrase of the music. I think new comboing like that can work is if you have some kind of like build up in the song or something like that. If there's a rising in intensity. I think you might even have something kind of like that before the main section, before the key or whatever would be the key. Although I'm not sure if it fits there. Yeah. Besides that, I guess there were just a few small combos that just were a bit weird, or like I didn't see the reason for using them.
Yeah, there's literally one on the stream right now.
Yeah, I think that's maybe even one of the best examples or something. Or like, it's for example, let me find something else. Here, I'm not sure I understand the point of the combo in here. If you were trying to follow phrases in the or like the most basic thing you could do would be, if you make the yellow note not yellow, and then you make everything afterwards yellow. So just everything after the big white tick is yellow. That would probably be the most simple thing you could do. Instead of making that one slider a different color, for no reason. Or at least I can't see a reason. Another thing that could work is if you put a combo on this one, and then everything after is part of the same combo. So like this. Because I sort of just hear that there's a different phrase in the vocals happening on the red tick.
Yeah,
At least that's how it sounds like to me.
I think getting into vocal phrasing is kind of
A bit more
difficult.
subjective.
It's not even
difficult,
just
yeah.
subjective. It's a good thing to do, but a lot of people will find that very tricky, especially considering they may be mapping a song of a language they can't speak. So it's kind of a slippery slope to try to do that kind of thing. I think a lot of the times, at least when I map, I will use well, there's two things really. There's the actual vocals, the the lyrics themselves, and then also the pitches of like how the pitches are grouped in the vocal.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically doing it in the intro, and I think he's doing it very well there. Or relatively well. Maybe the groupings could be different in the intro as well, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think getting to the point of grouping based on lyrics is kind of, it does kind of get out there a bit.
Yeah. This one works really well at 17 seconds. Then at 20 seconds, it's getting a bit not so sure about that one anymore. I would like use different combos there. Like let me show an example. Oops.
Oh, you should have recorded your
This one.
lecture on new combos. We could have just sent it to him.
I mean, you have access to my class, no? You can just read the document.
True. Yeah, me and Soletus did a lecture with his mentees purely about new comboing.
Yeah.
And I was in it for it. We covered like a lot, but going over every single way a new combo can be used does take a surprising amount of time, which we
Yeah.
probably don't have time for today. But I'll if Sally's probably okay with it, I'll link the doc, and then if you just want a lecture on it in particular, we can do it at some point.
Yeah. I can just repeat it as well in here if anyone wants.
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be able to just click on my announcement?
Yeah, all Mentor channels now, if you just haven't noticed, are open for viewing to everyone. So you can go into Selectus' class and just read announcements.
Yeah, in announcements there's a Google document on comboing. In case you're like reading, I guess. If you don't like reading, then you're gonna have to do it in a different way. But yeah, I guess the issue with your map, Kazakhs here in general, is there are like a few patterns where I'm not sure if the phrases really line up with phrases in the music, and then there's a few objects which just have singular combos. In general, I would say you don't really want to have objects almost ever where there's just a single combo in it, because like the main point is Mellow Wine earlier said is that combos group things together, right? But if you have objects that are just like one single thing, they sort of don't belong to any they are not grouped together to other things together very well. Now in some cases, I think that slider on screen actually that probably makes the most
Yeah, that's why
sense.
I went to it.
Yeah, that one does kind of make sense because it's like it stands out a lot, and you could maybe even say that it's like some kind of like pickup right before the next measure or some shit.
Yeah.
If you want to be super technical, but oftentimes you don't want to have new comboing groups that are like too short, because then you're not grouping enough objects sort of together.
Yeah, you don't want to do this kind of thing everywhere. It should really be like you should use this to make a singular part of the map stand out, really.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't want to new combo all of these, for example.
Yeah, that makes them feel disconnected from everything else.
Yeah. And there's not really anything too special happening on these triples to warrant that kind of new combo structure.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've spent quite a lot of time on this map, so let's move on. Although to be fair, we spent a lot of time on Laskov's map, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose it's not
I'm
too
not
bad.
sure if it's roughly the same, probably not, but
Okay, Rumia's map's next. I think we'll look at Rumia's map and then Tango's map. I may just give feedback in DMs for that one. Just because we seem to be spending a lot of time going through these maps. And Tango's not here, so.
while we were talking about new comboing, what is this circle? What is this doing, Rumia?
Wait, a stacking error. Stacking error, please. What is this?
Just turn on stack leniency 0. Easy fix.
Rumia, you've got a. Please, I'm doing the stacking check. Do you map with stacking enabled? I'm sure I've asked this before.
Exposed right here. Not mapping or stacking enabled. In the view options at the top, there's a thing called stacking. Let me
Yeah,
show
it's
a
the
screenshot.
it's the bottom option, and if you've got that disabled, everything is perfectly stacked. If you enable it, then
I can't screenshot it. Fuck.
so basically, if with stacking disabled, this pattern looks okay. But with stacking enabled, you can see there's some kind of like weird visual overlap going on. Yeah, this is like deja vu because Tango had this in their map.
Cause that has to go, I think.
Oh, yeah, if you need to go, that's fine. Well, we've gone over your map. If you have any questions or you do watch this back when I upload it, just like let me know and I'll answer any questions.
Okay, Rumia has it enabled. I guess just enabling it isn't enough to necessarily catch sort of weird looking things, right?
Yeah, this could easily be overlooked. Another
Yes.
thing could be mapping with hit animations, possibly. Who here maps
So
with who here maps with hit animations?
And again, under the view options.
The main Kai of the map, but there is no Kai in the map. You're trying to tell me you spent no effort on it? Okay, if Tango joins, I suppose we'll look at the map.
This map uses some real tech new comboing.
Okay, let's turn hit animations back off. Okay, I've
Did
not
you
seen this
explain
map.
why it looks weird, by the way, the stack?
It looks weird because I said so. No,
It looks weird because 7 and 6 usually would perfectly overlap, but they don't perfectly overlap.
The other thing that makes it look weird is, when a map is using, just because of how the editor works, players are more accustomed to seeing a stack like this, than a stack like this. If you see a stack like this in a map which isn't really using it much, it just kind of looks like really weird visually. It's like, which one of these? These are essentially the same, just the order of objects is reversed. And tell me which one looks weird.
The left one, clearly.
They both look
Never
weird.
seen a pattern like that. Never seen an object like the left one before. I only play tech.
You only play hard rock. Everything's perfect starts.
Not sure if I would agree with Mellowine on that, by the way.
Example of a mapper that's really good at grouping things up with NCs is GPS Panda. I
don't know many
I said Enkeys then. I've gotten that from you. You always say Enkeys.
N-keys, what?
Oh, and what?
N-keys. Oh, N-Cs.
Yeah, you whenever I hear you say NC, you pronounce the letters separately.
What the fuck? You mean me?
Yeah, you say it.
No, N-keys.
I think Panda is really good at like NCing like what is needed to be NC'd. Either it's like rhythm or sometimes it's like patterns. And I think he's like good at grouping things up. And that's like why I think his NCs are good.
I would
So
say
I'm kind of biased though because he kind of taught me to NC and I'm kind of shit at NCs. Which maybe is just a proof that he's bad. I don't know.
From what I've seen from him, he's like like many tag mappers. I feel like he uses too many and
yeah, I agree. I mean, just look at any of Devious Panda's more complex driven maps. Feels like everything's just new comboed from that new mapper perspective of all the rhythm change, like new combo, as if that actually is a good idea.
Devious Panda does it for like color hacking, so like red for some like snapping, and that's like why it's
I think at some point,
NC.
this is like a really strange argument, I suppose,
Well,
because
that's like the whole tournament thing. It's like they kind of try to implement players to read NCs, but like his normal maps are like what I mean, like what I meant. Like not his turny rhythm fuckery maps.
to be fair, I don't actually know any Devious Panda maps other than the complex ones.
the one I was thinking of was there's this one, I don't know how many. It's like a really high star Kushuni one. Kushuni. I don't fucking know how to pronounce it. And that one I feel like has really bad NCs because it's just there's so many of them. There's even the thing where it's like if the nodes are really spaced out, there's NCs on all of the nodes just to remove the follow points, and I hate that. It's like there's only NCs in some of those streams are only used for the purpose of removing follow points, and that's it.
Well, this is an interesting discussion. Let's not lose
But that's not.
focus.
Yeah. Let's ignore that.
Let's look at this map. Why does this song sound so familiar?
Because Sharu.
No, I've never heard this song before, but it sounds like another song.
I've played this before when I was looking at the Sharu thing. This is Sharu mapped this, and we looked at it together in the tournament thing when looking for mappers.
This song is giving me some vibes of another song.
I don't feel like this one is better visually organized than the what's that thing by Rumia, the map that I GD'd on.
Oh, yeah,
Area 51,
Section 9.
Section 9.
Area
51.
That's you gotta change the diff name to Area 51 now.
Oh yeah, Jordan, you've definitely heard this song before.
I haven't. I don't remember it.
Again, in our tournament thing, when we looked at for mappers. And I looked at some Sharu map of this. Oh.
Oh, wait.
some fun.
Oh, I know what it reminds me of now. It's the intro kind of sounds like Exile, Virtual Riot. I don't know, they still have vocals or something.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
What?
it gives me that vibe. Okay, which I totally forgot to see which part of the Kai was. 54 seconds. Oh, this bit, okay.
The one with the most green lines, I think. It's funny how the aspect ratio makes the green lines look different on my end.
This is the problem with not having time to prepare.
Yeah, true.
You need to let me just give me a minute to look at this. Just another
I have
time.
maybe one general I have maybe one general point about a different section. That's fine.
Oh yeah, sure, go on.
It's this section with the slow sliders. I think one thing you could have done a lot different in that section is because it still sounds so intense, something you could have done is use the same SV, but like twice or 3 times the spacing. Otherwise, I mean, right now it's just like really boring. Like this is a lot of slow sliders, and then there's some small spacing in between. But there's nothing wrong with just using really slow sliders with like huge spacing out of them, like almost cross screen. That's just totally fine. Could have easily done that to make it more interesting. And yeah, I mean like really, really huge spacing, like half the screen.
Yeah, true. Those sounds have like a lot of impacts. Also, the comboing was good until you just like new comboed all this.
Yeah.
I think these single combo sliders do work well because they kind
Well,
of
you should make the spacing overkill because it's the only thing that you have left to make the intensity more intense.
yeah the
Because
sliders.
the rhythm density is like the rhythm density is just dead. There's nothing for the player to click except for what's it like it's like 3 half beat gaps.
Yeah,
That's like a really long rhythm. Like if you and because sliders almost just feel like or because spacing between sliders is very similar to just 1-1 spacing between circles or something. You almost have to use like full screen spacing to make these intense at all.
yeah. I mean, you may
Otherwise,
think
it's just too boring.
the spacing would be overkill, but I mean, if that is a concern, another option you do have is to shorten these sliders. If you did want to give some more leniency out of slider ends.
Yeah, this would make things a lot more lenient, but I do feel like using extended sliders and large spacing, that's actually the way to go.
Yeah, you could. That would be my ideal thing. Would be like maybe
I've done, I think,
like
something
that.
like that once in. Do you remember our crystallized thing, Jordan?
Yeah.
There's like a section in that has that. Not sure if I personally have ever done this in a different map, but this is something very relatively common. There's a few maps that do this kind of stuff, where you have like these really slow, relatively long sliders, but you have like super large spacing between them. I mean, any spacing that's not this is better. And with this pattern specifically, there's also this issue that Jordan earlier sort of mentioned in what was his name again? In Kazak's map.
Yeah.
About like slider leniency. In this case, it's like players can basically just click the slider head and then wait a little bit, and that's it. Then they click the next object. They have to like for 4 beats, they can stay in the same point and just click a bit. That's just too boring. There's nothing going on there.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
spacing would be a lot better.
I mean, and
Okay, that's it. That's the one section that's like could be improved a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can
but the other
use
sections are a lot better instead.
large spacing like that by abusing sliding lenience on 1/4s to kind of make a less dense section feel more intense when the rhythm probably doesn't support it. And I just downloaded an example.
One thing maybe about the extended slider thing is that, or about slider leniency sort of is, if you're using like just if there's a half beat gap between sliders, then leniency makes most things like super easy. Like even cross screen jumps are relatively easy if they're between sliders.
Pretty much.
But it's a huge difference if you make the slider extended if the gap is 1/4 of a beat.
Yeah, if it's
Um,
1/4, it's a much snappier motion. If it's a half beat, you could compare it to being like the slightly more difficult 1 beat jump.
Yeah, in general, I guess movement with between 1/4 gaps in general is like a lot harsher. But you can abuse stuff like that. I think a lot of people nowadays, people who make say CS2 or CS0 maps, they abuse this kind of thing where they basically make all of the filler rhythm 1/4 to make movement a lot harsher. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can show your example, Jordan.
Yeah, so like these sections are not too dense. But I've done like absolutely humongous spacing out of some of these.
Humongous.
Remember when humongous was a thing?
It was too long ago.
But yeah, just pretty much large spacing. This is not overkill by any means. It's not. It is difficult to play. That's the whole point of it. But the fact, the rhythm density is so low, and like after a player snaps this object, they don't really have to move through the next slider. It makes it a lot easier to play.
I think there might be a Hollow Wings map that abuses this really hard. I think it might have been Helix or something. Yeah, I think it was Helix.
I can't even remember. Oh, Hollow Wings is Helix. Did that do that? I don't think
Yeah.
I've seen that map for a while.
I don't know if you have it.
I probably do. It's an old
Oh, you have
map.
to pass by it, I think.
Here, I've got this unsubmitted one.
That's not it, but...
It's CS5, so maybe it is.
Oh, there, EX, the other diff. That's the Hollow Wings one. If you like look at most of the sections, especially the Ki, they're like... This is like the epitome of this idea of slow as fuck sliders with really large spacing out of them.
Yeah.
And this map does it really well. Also, this map is really uncomfortable.
It's so fun though.
Yeah, it's just so good.
I love this jump pattern.
The anti-jumps.
Okay. Let's go back. Yeah, since you said you spent a lot of the time on the Kai, I think it's going to be most productive to kind of dissect the Kai more than the other sections.
Probably.
I don't get the emphasis. This is why I kind of struggled when I first saw it. I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're trying to follow. I can obviously tell what you're following in terms of rhythm. You're following like the whoop sounds and everything. There's like such a strong snare in this section, and at points it feels like really ignored. Everything's kind of spaced. Everything's just kind of like mushed together. I can't think of a better analogy. But I feel like no particular pattern or point or jump or point of emphasis is particularly standing out. Almost as if you're trying to emphasize everything. Like there's some patterns which stand out for purely visual reasons like this. But then just compare like how this pattern plays. Like essentially all of this plays the same.
Or like the spacing's relatively small.
Yeah, this can somewhat play as one fluid motion, where nothing in particular has been given any emphasis. Even considering like this slider shape here, it's not really impacting how the slider's played. Because the player is just moving through these slider heads anyway, so.
You broke one.
That's fine.
I think the main difference in emphasis is sometimes there are only two types of spacing you seem to really have, which are spaced out or the slider end and the next object are overlapping. That's like the main two different ones. As I guess if there's some occasional 1-2 jumps, but most of the jumps are like 1-4 or they're out of small sliders, so they're basically like 1-2 jumps.
Yeah, I think my main issue with this map, I'll try not to be as contentious as possible, but the gameplay itself lacks vision. There's a lot of cool patterns visually. Gameplay seems secondary. Or at least what I should say, sorry, I should reword that. Gameplay in relation to song representation. There is some cool parts. Like, I like this. You've created like a nice contrast with this sudden stop of movement. And there are some like cool kind of like overlapped jump stuff. But what I said about the rest of the map kind of does still follow, where some of these slider patterns just feel like they're all spaced the same. Like they've been made for some kind of interesting visual without any kind of gameplay that ties into the music. Put to it as well.
I feel like to really judge this one, you would have to like talk a lot about specific patterns. Like there's nothing, or it's hard to explain the issues here in any general terms.
Yeah.
Like there's maybe one example I could maybe give would be, say, these two objects here. I think the point I'm assuming is sort of that like the big red slider, the long slider, that one is supposed to sort of feel relatively fast compared to the previous objects, which are relatively low spacing. The issue is sort of here that like, first of all, because the slider shape is so contracted together, it's very easy for the player to, even just without noticing, abuse most of it and not move a lot through it. And then the spacing out of it, because the next object is sort of like below instead of implied to the left side, also additionally encourages the player to abuse it, which makes the slider feel a lot slower than you might have intended. There are probably a lot of, I would say, a lot of a few patterns where something like that is the case, where maybe you intended for something to either feel faster than it really is, or maybe there are some sliders which have slow SV, but they don't feel like they are. The gameplay of them isn't really slow because spacing out of them isn't small. There's probably a lot of tiny things like that that all sort of add up a little bit. Was this
Yes.
This was not part of the speed map.
It was. Yeah.
For a speed map, that's pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, considering there was a kind of there was pressure of completing something in time, and also considering the fact that you was busy until Tuesday as well, it is like a good map. I won't say otherwise. It is a good map. This map is at the point of it's at the point of where we have to be hypercritical of some of these things. But even saying that some of these opinions may be hypercritical, like I still feel that there is a fundamental issue with how you've handled mapping this guy in terms of song representation and emphasis as well. If I had time to prepare for this, I would have I would have gone through, pointed out specific examples where the same kind of issue repeats but in different contexts. I will do that actually after this lecture at some point. I'll go in detail on these sections. But yeah, there's many other ways. I think the most frustrating thing, really, at least from my perspective of looking at this map, is there was a lot of potential with what the song was offering, and it feels like it was missed out on.
By the way, Rumia, have you taken the shower room map as an inspiration? The shower room map of this? I think it looks somewhat similar. Although obviously not the same. Okay, I see. Oh, I think in the first key there also were some. I don't know how often that happens, but I noticed there were, for example, some like say kicks on some ticks that weren't mapped because you put extended sliders on them instead. That's not a huge issue, I guess, because if it's not part of the main layer you're following, then it's like not that important. But sometimes you can passively follow other sounds in the song by putting slider ends on them.
Yeah, I think this section, considering the constraints of how it was mapped, the rhythm is like.
The rhythm is pretty good.
Yeah, the rhythm's good.
At the same time, rhythm on I think songs like these is sometimes easier because like the drums and the sounds generally overlap, right? Not always, but generally.
Yeah, there comes a point where you can map one layer and it just so happens that another layer lines up perfectly with it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why one of the first issues I mentioned when I was talking about emphasis was the snares. Because the snares are like always lining up with stuff, but they don't feel particularly emphasized like anywhere, apart from here, which I already pointed out. Yeah, I'm gonna go over this in more detail when I've got some time to like type some stuff about it and analyze what your intentions are, because I'm finding it really difficult to see your intentions, which is making it hard to give good feedback. But if you've got any questions, I'll try my best to answer them now.
Oh, by the way, don't obscure reverse arrows. I just don't. Okay.
Don't listen to Sally. Obscure all of them.
How does one get a partner? You say something really lewd. That's it.
You just log on to Grindr. Yeah, I hate the whole concept of Tinder.
Really. I hate Jordan. Look at my stream.
Okay.
Seem familiar?
No.
Actually, this one should seem familiar.
Oh, I recognise this one. Wait, is this Sharu's?
Yes.
I just recognise those yellow sliders.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I only saw like 10 seconds of it though, so.
Or something like that. But actually, what did Sharu do in this section? Oh. Well, I didn't mean this section, but that's funny.
That's cool.
There's definitely faster sliders.
I like the how the rhythms varying so much.
I'm not sure.
It makes every
I think I
pet.
actually like this one more than the other Ki.
Yeah, me too. It makes the even though like it's the same thing repeating, and it's the same thing that's been emphasized. The fact that rhythm's switching up so much is making the map look very engaging, and basically keeping the player on their toes. You know, in terms of reading the map and reacting to different rhythms.
That's a weird slider.
That's a cool slider.
What is this? Red anchor here. Anyway,
That's just the that red anchor works. That's just the aesthetic.
sure.
Anyway, let's look at Tangle's map. I've seen like the first 20 seconds of Drain on this, so I'm not going in completely blind.
I am though.
Tangle. Look at Tangle's map. Okay, Tango, from now on you're called Fanta.
There's one thing which Hey, whatever. Just if you look at it.
Did I ever look at the updated central nucleus you made? I can't remember. I'll take a look at it after this. Yeah, I'll send you some stuff in DMs. Probably not today, but tomorrow. This map's cool.
True. Has some things to say, but it's overall pretty nice. I feel like the same somewhat goes with Rumia's.
Okay, good night, Rumia.
See ya.
Okay, I'm also gonna go.
Okay, see ya.
Okay, see
Have a
ya.
good one, guys.
Yeah, this is a pretty good map. I do have quite a few things to say. Yeah, same song but repeated like 3 times. Yeah, when a version of a song, full version of a song is just repeated sections, it's kind of boring. When there's like no variation between them. Okay.
First thing I noticed, if I can maybe say something,
Yeah.
is this one pattern. I'm like really confused. Why is spacing into 2 so small, and then spacing into 3 is like super huge?
Yeah. It makes no sense, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's a snare on 2, in addition to both on 2 and 3. There's this like string. Is it a string thing? String melody. There's the melody on it basically on both notes.
I can
But on 1, there's on 2, there's additionally the snare.
I can
So
under
intuitively, you would space out 2 even more than 3.
Yeah, I think my issue is the fact that this slider head here is more intense than here, and I'm taking that opinion just based off the rise in pitch, and like this motif is repeated.
Oh, by
Here
the way,
you did
sorry.
emphasize the pitch changes with a large jump, and then you did like the complete opposite here. It's like a really strange inconsistency. It's kind of like you can't decide how you want to map this. Do you want to emphasize this, or do you want to just like do some small spacing? In certain contexts, like an anti-jump can provide emphasis, but when it's done like this at a sharp angle, very comfortable flow, it's underwhelming more than anything else.
I think the anti-jump is, or what he means by anti-jump is the slider into 2. I don't know if that was a joke comment or if it's like serious or something. I assume
Oh.
it's somewhat of a joke. Something that, but that's maybe still worth pointing out is it's kind of. I don't know if it makes sense to say that it's ever possible to have a anti-jump out of a slider, or if you, it might be possible, but for an anti-jump to sort of work, you need to have really, really fast movement into really, really slow movement.
Yeah, there
And
needs
the
to be
slider,
more of a.
yeah, and the slider, is just not fast enough for the next note to sort of like feel like it's a sudden stop in momentum. It would kind of work if, say, the slider was going almost over the entire screen, really,
I'll
really fast, and then on the slider end, the slider end was stacked with 2 or something.
I'll give
That would be like kind of what the slider anti-jump meme. That would kind
class.
of be it.
This is the classic Jordan example of this is what silly means.
In that case, there's also this one really large 1-1 gap afterwards.
Yeah, so it's kind of the gap helps as well, but it's the sudden change in the cursor's momentum which makes an anti-jump work. And when you have a low when you have a lower SV, which doesn't particularly involve much movement, and then a half beat jump, that's not really going to work.
Yeah. Especially with sliders, it's really hard, or with longer sliders. For example, this slider is 1 beat, right? Usually in really intense sections, to make even a jump between 2 circles, that's like 1 beat, feel very intense, you almost have to space them out over the entire screen. But sliders are then even a little bit more lenient than circles, right? So
yeah, you don't even necessarily have to space it over the entire screen. I think circle
it depends on the
size
context of the
circle
map
size
as
does
well,
come
circle
into
size.
circle size comes into effect with this as well, with the amount of a smaller circle size, but a slider is the same length. The smaller circle size is going to feel faster because it requires more precision to follow the slide body. But at CS4, this stuff doesn't work. Maybe if it was CS7, you could probably pull it off. But that's like the fact that I'm saying it would probably have to be CS7 for this to work. It should pretty much tell you already that you probably can't pull it off.
Things like these also depend on the spacing in the section in general or previous spacing. Like the slider has to feel fast in comparison to everything else around in the map for it to sort of work. I generally would just not recommend using small spacing out of sliders ever. It almost never works for emphasis.
Yeah, I suppose a context in which this could work would be, let's just ignore the song for a second. Let's say you were to do a small spacing into this next slider. You could use that to maybe create some kind of contrast to emphasize a larger jump, but the song also does not support this because you have an anti-jump here into a large jump when this really should not be emphasized, especially considering the song itself rising pitch and like other consistencies with emphasis as well. Yeah, and this pattern basically repeats a couple of times. I appreciate the fact that you have tried to go with some kind of variety in gameplay by doing this kind of thing, but when you're completely reversing how you're actually representing the song, it doesn't work. It's like this is kind of like wait, this is like the first pattern, but good.
But good. That's a toxic way of putting it.
And this actually kind of follows my suggestion of an increase of spacing through the pitch. It probably doesn't do it to the correct amount, at least I don't think this is emphasized enough in this example.
Nice stream, by the way.
Yeah, this is a cool stream. I like
Really
I like the stack as well, and the movement onto the three. Something that's...
I'll add something to say about that stream as well. Can I?
Yeah.
So something about rhythm when it comes to streams in Wood 4 is it's most comfortable for players to like click an odd amount of notes, or to like player usually has like a dominant finger and a not dominant finger, and they like to. It's usually the finger where you single tap with, and it's most comfortable usually for most people to start patterns and end them with that dominant finger. Now, with streams, it's sort of the case that you alternate between your dominant and non-dominant finger, and it then obviously feels the nicest when you end the pattern on the strong one, so to speak. The weird thing with this pattern here, for example, is that the player has to hold down with the strong finger on the slider on 3, and then start tapping with their weak finger on the stream, then it alternates between weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, and then you end on the next slider with your weak finger, which makes the pattern sort of feel weird. Or it makes it feel like it's an even amount of notes, even though it isn't. The way to sort of like make the pattern feel even more comfortable, or basically just like the player is clicking an odd amount of notes, is either you make the first note of the stream a slider end, so like you extend the slider a little bit and then remove one note, or you make the previous slider 1/4 shorter. So the player can like click with their strong finger and then reset on the beginning of the stream.
Oh, I would like to provide an opposing viewpoint.
That's not a skill issue for the player, by the way.
I believe in applying Selectus' suggestion. Now, firstly, let's just get this out of the way. A pattern being uncomfortable is not a bad thing.
I agree.
But it is good to recognize and know when a pattern is uncomfortable, just for the reasons of knowing what's getting, particular emphasis. Because if you have an uncomfortable pattern that you don't know is uncomfortable, you kind of have an issue there. Because at that point, you don't know how your map plays. So recognizing these kinds of patterns is a good thing. You shouldn't have to change it because it's uncomfortable. And I would
I agree with you as well.
recommend this pattern does likely deserve the emphasis of being uncomfortable, and I can tell that you recognize that as well, Tango, by the fact of the stacking and stream shapes that you've used. Um, I would disagree with Selly's analysis that this pattern is uncomfortable because the players alternate into a weak finger from a slider end. Because everybody I know who is good at the game does not play like that.
Nice. By the way, the issue here wasn't really, for me at least, that the pattern itself is sort of uncomfortable at all. Like, I don't give a shit that a pattern is uncomfortable. I think it's cooler if it's uncomfortable.
So
It's more that I think it's more important that you want to play a pattern to feel like it has an odd amount of clicks if it has an odd amount of actual nodes in it. So in this case, the stream starts on the white tick and it ends on the slider. So the amount of nodes is odd. But if you put it like this, it's gonna feel like it's not an odd amount of nodes, but an even amount of nodes. It's gonna not feel like a basic.
yeah. Now, how I understand gameplay, and I'm sure Selectus, if we can kind of agree on one thing, a player is most comfortable clicking with their dominant finger on a beat. Would you agree with that?
I think I would say they're most comfortable clicking on anything with it.
So, okay then.
Sorry.
If you're really going to say that, let's just take this pattern here. In fact, I'm just going to make the example I was actually going to make. If we have a pattern like this, would you say a player is more comfortable? In fact, let me just delete that. Would you say a player is more comfortable clicking this note with a dominant finger or this note? Now consider
Well,
consider the mathematics of this as to how the stream is formatted, what the final note is likely, what finger the final note is likely going to end on, etc.
so they're gonna end on the weak finger.
If they start on their strong finger here, they'll end on their weak finger here.
Yeah, and that's the least comfortable.
If there's an odd number of notes, it's more comfortable for a player to start clicking with their weak finger.
Well,
Now,
if it's
in an isolated example like this, a player wouldn't really have a prompt to start with their weak finger. Now, if any player has any ability of finger control and reading, they will see a pattern like this, naturally know to start this next object with a weak finger, in which case this pattern becomes comfortable. This is further due to the fact that there's like a consistent quarter beat Philip rhythm here. So it's kind of like you can recognize a new combo. This is a beat. I should click that with my index finger, so I'll click this with my weak finger. Compare that to if the slider was extended like this. A player would play this entry out of the slider end completely different, understanding that this is on a beat, they'll start it with their index finger. That's how finger control works and reading.
I think that might be the case. Although that sort of gets into like more of an issue of basically what's it? At that point, for players like that, any kind of stream is gonna be whatever. They're just gonna read it perfectly, so who cares about those players?
Yeah, and also
I would care more about the players where the experience would sort of like vary.
there's also an issue with what you've said. Apply your logic to this pattern.
Well, that's not the case because it's with 4 sliders. With 1 4 slide, after 1 4 sliders, you would reset. because they basically play like circles.
Yeah, when I play an extended slider, unless it's like starting on an offbeat like that, I perceive a slider end to be a reset of my fingers.
I can see that. I think for a lot of people, I'm not sure how universal this is. I think most people would reset if the gap was 1-2 between the objects, but with 1-4 it's a bit more tricky. With 1-4 it's sort of like implied that you're or a few people would, so to speak, just hold down and start on the next finger, right? At least a few, unless you're just like, as you say, really good at reading and alternating.
No, if the next note after a slider landed on the B, I mean, at least unless you're an alt or full out player, if you're a single tap player, then you would click the next note with your single tap. I say this from playing experience, and also just from I've never actually discussed this. This is just an intuition I've had. But actually explaining it out loud, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, in that case, then my opinion is just like an alternative.
It is.
I
It's
guess.
an.
Because in that sense, whether you do my thing or your thing, it basically doesn't matter.
This is kind of like the discussion of KDDK and DDKK players in Taiko.
Probably is kind of.
It's just a different play style, I suppose. It's a different way of actually playing rhythm.
So I guess then I would sort of like just see what I've said as an invitation. If you map a lot of things with like streams, there's a thing to consider about with which nodes the player has to click with which finger. And obviously you can sort of just use that to make basically any pattern feel comfortable. Even if it's like a quad or something, you can like make it feel comfortable even when it shouldn't be. Or you can just use it to like make things more comfortable when you feel like there's really what they really should be.
Yeah.
Or you can make something more uncomfortable by making the player by forcing the player to like start on with their weak finger on a note that they maybe wouldn't usually or something. Yeah. It's like just something to consider.
We're not necessarily saying the player cannot play this. We're not even saying it's an issue and you need to change it, or at least I'm not. We're just saying.
I am. Just kidding.
Just saying understanding how a pattern plays is very important.
Yeah. It can probably is also gets a lot more difficult if you're mapping something with really, really long chains of 1-4, where there's maybe some sliders in between. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Tango, you're proud. Your mapping is at the point where it's making me and selectors argue.
Damn. Incredible.
Yes, similar things here. Like we don't really need to go over this stuff again. But yeah, I do appreciate the consistency.
There's some small spacing which obviously works because the sliders are extended, but only some. No, it was earlier. In case you were looking for it.
I know I wasn't looking for it, but I'll look for it now.
Sorry.
Are you talking about these?
No. This slider isn't extended.
Oh, extended slider end.
This one, the free.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one works, the small spacing, because it's extended slider. The gap between the next object is 1-4.
Yeah. Okay, let's next section. I don't have anything particular to say about this, except there's that like snare one. I want to say it's 112.
Oh, I didn't even hear that.
Yeah. Those like 112 snares, you mapped them later on. Then there was like no introduction. Wait, you didn't even map them as 112. Oh, no, they are closer to 1.8. Yeah, 1.8 is probably the best. This would have been like a good place. You kind of started using these 1.8 doubles. Where were they? After a sudden like diff spike stream, large spacing, like in a quiet section like here, would have been a good place to maybe kind of introduce that idea. I think Hollow Wings' map of this does a similar thing, right?
I've never seen it actually.
Oh, Hollow Wings' map of this is so cool.
Casually look at it, I guess.
I'm gonna show. I'll show you.
By the way, if a player can't play those doubles, that's a skill issue. That's what I want to say. That's pretty cool.
Like there's some really cool 1-4 patterns in this. Like those. They're so good.
That's gamer pattern.
Tango, do you like this map? I'm pretty sure this was qualified as well. Or is it ranked? Maybe it got...
It's right.
No, it's Graveyard. Yeah, it was qualified or bubbled or something at one point.
Ooh, that's a nice stream.
There's one really weird thing about this stream, if you notice the order of these. Where is it? 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 is here.
What?
I feel
That's
like
evil. Oh my god.
I honestly feel like that's probably just a mistake.
Probably. That's like if it's not a mistake, that's just like evil.
Yeah.
No, I like evil, but maybe a bit too evil.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure these were just like Control G'd by accident or something. Yeah, this map's cool. It's got some like it's like super. This is like an example of like a good 7-star map because it's not just jump spam and it's got some interesting gameplay stuff going on, and then it's like it's kind of taking a certain gameplay element to an extreme, which is like what Hollow Wings does quite well. Anyway, back to this. Yeah, so definitely, if you're going to use 1.8 doubles, it's not something which comes up often in maps. If you're going to use it, you want to introduce it as early as possible, really. I had nothing else to say about the section though, did you?
Not really. I think maybe not really. Next section. Actually, this is already the next section.
Yeah. You want me to go back?
We looked at an even earlier one, I think. Hello, Nitro.
Hi, Nitro.
Hello, Sue.
I think this section's good, but it feels like it feels like very loose. I'm not sure the best way to put it. It's kind of like a bunch of patterns have been thrown into the map. They all make sense in terms of gameplay, but it's nothing like the other sections where you have like a clear idea that's repeating.
This jump is probably too big. Probably.
I feel like the structure is kind of falls apart just for this one small part. Where is that jump? 29,785. Yeah, true. Right, that is kind of a big jump. Yeah, it's kind of like you just. I understand this was speed maps. We've got to bear this in mind when we give feedback. But yeah, this section stands out in particular. Whereas the earlier parts and what I saw from later parts felt like they were executed really well. This was kind of fell flat. This part.
About the next section after this one, what do you think about the density?
That's kind of weird. I think the density is honestly I like this drop off of density here, but the strange part is like the sudden increase. I get the vocals have increased in density, but it suddenly goes from one beat gap, one beat rhythm, filler rhythm stuff. I guess you can call it one beat filler rhythm, right?
I'm not even sure if I would call it filler.
Well, consistent one beat gaps.
Yeah.
But then it transitions to half beat gaps, and it makes the section feel like completely different. And that's just simply because the vocals have increased in density. So the way that I would probably go about this is not undermap. I like the idea of undermapping this, but I don't think it supports what you've done here. It's basically like the same map, except now it's more dense and half beats instead of less dense on one beats. It's weird, and the amount that this increases in intensity, whilst the vocals do get more dense, doesn't really suit the pacing of the section itself.
If I can maybe give my thoughts on it. I was first asking you for your opinion because I feel like I would personally use a lot more 1-2 filler just because there's this like constant 1-2 background guitar or something. But at the same time, that's not necessarily I don't know what was it. Not necessarily a good idea, or like not everyone would do that. Like low density kinda does fit in some way. But it could also work to just use a lot of 1-2 filler and just very little active rhythm, like a lot of reverses and
And
stuff.
I think if you are also Tango concerned with this difference, then you should apply Selly's suggestion of using the half beat filler here instead of one beat sliders, because then that would fix basically both of our issues at once.
What were you just talking about? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying that if Tango applies your suggestion, it effectively addresses both of our concerns.
Okay.
Yeah, I like this. This bit's cool. I like the jump patterns. I'm indifferent of this one, but
I don't like the comboing on this one. The sudden combo spam there. But yeah, this section is pretty alright.
yeah, like the
I didn't mean this combo spam, by the way.
oh, I know.
Okay. Yeah, it's not even spam.
Yeah, I like this. Yeah, these combos are kind of in weird parts. Do you know what's really strange about this though, Seller? How do you know that Tango is not applying your previous suggestion of new comboing on vocal phrases? Can you speak Japanese?
Oh, I don't need to speak Japanese.
So how can you say with any certainty that this comboing doesn't already meet basically one of your other suggestions?
Because you don't need to hear the language. It's about what's stressed and the pitches and stuff.
Not
Which I think I
necessarily.
want, bro.
Not necessarily. I mean, what if the vocals at this point changed the topic, or it was the start of a new sentence?
Well, why is the start of a new sentence the start of a new phrase?
Wait, say
Getting
that again.
philosophical here. Why is the start of a new sentence the start of a new phrase?
You raise a very good point, and I don't specifically see how that applies to this discussion. Stop being so semantical.
Sure.
Please, Sally, do you even can you even define what a phrase is?
No.
So how
If I
can
was
you...
if I was gonna be like a big academic philosopher, I would just say it's self-evident, bro. I have a self-evident intuition that this is the case. That I know, I just know, bro.
Well, I have a self-evident intuition that you're just chatting bullshit.
True.
Anyway, so you know, all memes aside, there is an issue with the combo in here. I was just trying to raise
NC every pattern.
just
It's
NC
the
every
nitro method.
NC every slider velocity change.
Nah, just NC every pattern. Also, you got a BN for credits.
Another
And
I
one.
already know that.
And yeah, and it's confirmed, so
Celebrate my combo win.
Good out of good.
Yeah, this is what Sally means by new combo with vocal phrases. I'm not sure if you know. Well, of course, I'm fairly sure you know about new combo and vocal phrases. But the combo we did seem a bit all over the place, and it lacked like a proper new combo structure. So if you were to apply a combo in like this, which is more consistent in like following the song.
Otherwise, you just put it on the big white ticks and then you're done.
Current
Those are
combo
phrases.
in current combo in is kind of doing the opposite, where it's kind of also like we discussed before, just like new combo in the separation of patterns. Kind of, I suppose. It kind of does it.
Yeah.
Where it looks like it's just like new combo in where. But yeah, again, it's a speed map, so.
I think
Oh.
before this one, there was one. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, it's kind of like, did this need to be new? A new combo in this is kind of. Some of these new combos are questionable because. I mean, it depends how you want to do it, but again, the new combos do not feel. They feel kind of like slapped on. Not really relating any kind of phrasing in the music or any like particular sounds. Honestly, I feel like these are probably not getting enough emphasis either.
Getting some emphasis from being 1-4 leading into them, but could be more.
I would probably do some kind of direction change leading from the double, just to.
Yeah. 1-4 jump might be a bit.
Yeah, don't do a
needs
1-4.
needs more introduction to do
Yeah,
that.
and it wouldn't really suit the rest of your map, because the rest of your map is focusing on like 1-2 jumps and stream shapes.
1-2 stacks.
A 1-2 stack is a 1-2 jump.
True.
Yeah,
And there could be more spacing into that stack.
when I saw this section, I thought, well, the rhythm kind of fell off. Like there's just a sudden density drop and everything's just spaced big.
That's kind of true.
Whereas there's like some filler, not filler, sorry. There's like some streams on the fills and stuff. But overall, like just comparing it to you know, this section which has quite a lot of 1-4 doubles and stuff. It feels like it's kind of gone backwards in terms of the progression of rhythm, which makes it quite underwhelming. Also, I like this pattern, but I feel like you could have maybe bumped SV a bit. Just to kind of emphasize the stops on these stacks.
Probably.
Yeah, it's because this is a cool idea, but I feel like the SV is kind of like not. You're not using SV to your advantage to kind of make this pattern stand out more. It's like such a unique pattern that you've made, and it repeats a couple of times. Did you actually gradually increase it? I think you like slightly increased it each time by like 0.5 or 0.05. If you were to like increase it, start it off faster and then maybe increase it more, just for a kind of progression, I think you can make these. I mean, this can be seen as like a climax of the section. So you can kind of go more ham with it.
Something which you could also do, I'm not sure if it's necessarily better or anything, would be starting out with lower SV and then getting higher and higher in SV and making the like changes really, really noticeable. Like not like say 0.5 or more.
I think a gradual increase wouldn't make sense in terms of song representation.
Probably. I
Um,
mean, I would just say that it's another possibility.
yeah, just listening to the pitches, like
It's basically the same.
Uh, no, the pitches of the strings and the vocals pretty much match up. It goes like, if we're going to assign numbers to the pitches, it goes like 4, 1, 2, 3, where 4 is the highest pitch. 4, 1, 2, 3. So like a constant increase probably wouldn't make much sense.
Yeah, but there's things you could do. Like
I
that.
think this is
It's pretty right.
it's
Just faster, maybe.
it's simple enough. Like
Yeah.
it works. You don't really need to overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Too
Even
much.
with the SV right now, it kinda just works alright.
Yeah, it definitely could be more, could stand out more though. It's just a suggestion, it's not even a problem really. I'm fairly sure a lot of the things we've said so far are just going to apply to other sections. Just because it's like all pretty much a copy-paste song. Yo. I like this pattern, but then also just throwing a linear in at this point in the song doesn't make sense to
I
me.
mean, he has used linear before, or at least wide angle.
He used wide angle, but this linear into wide angle with a spacing change feels quite harsh. And this is supposed to be like, you know, a cooldown of some sorts before this part. So it kind of doesn't make sense in terms of the pacing of what this section should be doing to have such a harsh pattern like this.
I would say it's just a skill issue moment, but that's and Jordan's concern is understandable. So-
It's okay. Do this instead and call it skill issue. I've literally
Damn, that's a skill issue.
I've literally done this pattern in a map before, unironically, but it was actually 1-4.
How fast was the BPM?
I can't remember. It's like 160 or something.
Good one for stream. Let's go.
It was Reflux. Have you seen my Reflux map?
No,
Okay,
probably not.
let's get
Take it, please.
let's get distracted again.
Let's go. Distraction.
Um,
My number one Skyrim skill. I haven't seen this before, no.
okay. Listen, I think I've shown you this. Maybe just like a one pattern. It's got the overflow. This is such a good pattern. It actually unironically fits so well.
What's the star rating on this map?
6.4.
Oh, it's 150.
Oh, it's
6.4
150.
is still pretty damn.
It's got the oval. I love this oval aesthetic. I should do it more. This is a cool map though.
Flexing
More
on
ovals. True. No, it's just an example of. Well, I was gonna go through some maps anyway, and analyze them. I wasn't exactly gonna go through my own, but
True, analyze my maps instead.
I'll analyze the copy paste.
Yes.
I did kind of want to say before that you're probably one of the people where copy paste works,
I think so.
but I've definitely said this before. But it's simply because of basically how you structure your maps and your general aesthetic style.
True,
Um,
I guess.
yeah. Whereas if you like,
If
you
I
know,
had a different style,
co-
then no.
copy paste this slider and it's immediately noticeable.
Yes.
Pretty much.
I think I wouldn't even do that. Because the shape stands out so much. Damn, he had to go. Or did he just left? Tango
Bruh.
just
Oh.
left. Well, I mean, we
Rip
basically said
Bozo.
almost anything about his map.
Yeah, we pretty much like the sections repeat, so
Is there a thing in the middle, like a bridge or something?
oh, Wi-Fi.
Lol. Rip Wi-Fi.
Yeah, this part. I think this part's okay though. The only questionable thing may be like these.
I like
Is-
that pattern. I guess it's maybe a bit difficult to read if you want to, if you're using NC spam actually.
I don't think it's the readability. I feel like there's just all of this spaced, and then obviously emphasis is intended on this.
Yeah.
It feels unnecessary to space this much. Like, what if it was spaced like this?
At the same time, higher spacing like that, and maybe the triangle as well, sort of makes it more obvious that it's 1/3.
But what about the new combos?
I would remove the new combos because I'm an edgelord.
Yeah, I like this part though. I like the 2-beat sliders. They're pretty cool.
The funny wave.
There are a lot of funny waves.
That's Tango
Is
is this is literally the ideal wave shape. It's a nice and simple 4-point wave. Everyone should just do wave sliders like this.
And not use the grid for it.
Nope. Eyeball everything.
Oh, I don't understand the new combo spam on these either. Is it because it's 3/4 sliders or something?
I do believe the new combos are used like this because the vocals are quite unique and harsh.
Probably. I mean, they are not used on the one time where it's just circles, which makes it a bit confusing for me.
The weird thing here that I can see is this is basically the same as this, except a different shape. Except
And this time sounds different as well.
yeah, the strings back in each of the slider heads that are rising in pitch.
Now, I think the next time this part of the song happens, it's just circles actually.
I'm gonna leave to play Valorant. Goodbye.
Yeah, see ya.
Okay, see ya. In this part.
Yeah, and then it's not unseed anymore. Is it actually mapped at all?
Imagine this would have been based if you did like
Actually would have been based.
unironically, if you would have done 3/4 beat jumps, like maybe even new combo them. I know Sally will probably hate that idea, but
Yeah. Would be more consistent at least. I
that
guess.
would be so cool for this section because it's the overmap here kind of feels like you're ignoring these vocals that you previously mapped. You could make this section feel really unique. You've already
Overmap doubles could also work.
Yeah, you could do
No.
overmap doubles as well. That wouldn't be as cool though.
Would it? I mean, it would be more dense at least. Or for just big ass 3/4 beat jumps. Would be
Yeah,
epic.
big ass 3/4 beat jumps. Because you've already introduced 3/4 beat rhythms here on these specific vocals, so to like effectively ignore them by doing half beat filler rhythm kind of
It's
sucks.
just kind of cringe.
Yeah. Like just imagine the potential.
The gamer move.
It would have been this would have made this section feel like so unique if you did that. Rather than feeling just like kind of filler.
Yeah, the doubles will probably catch a few more drums in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, you could also do like I suppose I would probably avoid that 4-note burst.
Yeah.
It's really you can do it either way. Or you can keep it how it is, but ignoring that vocal is kind of cringe, like Sally said. See, I don't get this spacing. It's similar to the intro, where you've got like a tight half beat space into a snare, coming out of a slider, and then like a large jump to nothing in particular. It's a very strange emphasis.
I have one more funny thing about this pattern here. If we think back about the thing I was talking about with the thinking about with which finger to start a pattern and with which to end. In this case, there's actually nothing wrong, but it's like just thinking about if we assume that every player sort of like switches fingers on all of these repeat sliders, then it's it happens to be the case that the player also would start with the strong finger on the next stream. But if you had one more slider for some reason, then it might be different. So yeah, that's another one of those patterns where it might be important to consider with which player is the with which finger is the player playing what. In this case, it's just totally comfortable. I mean the repeat sliders, the next ones.
I was actually I was applying what you said before to this pattern, and I was thinking if I saw this pattern, I would definitely play the 7 with my weak finger.
Yeah, you probably
But-
would because it's like a triple, right?
Yeah, but if I saw this, I'd play it with my strong finger.
I'm not sure if I would, but maybe
Yeah,
you and a few
but-
players would.
You're
I think-
you're not high rank though, so also neither am I.
Nice.
I've been
I mean,
trying to.
I think that's probably the case that a lot of players, even on extended sliders, they like reset. But it's like a difficult thing to say how many players do that.